KMET AM, FM, and Internet KMET TV.
Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them, with Daryl McCance and Yvette Walker. And now, here's Daryl and Yvette.
Thank you for joining the Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV with Yvette Walker and myself, Daryl McCance. We are live blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, the Inland Empire, Orange County, and greater Los Angeles area to our west, the desert communities all the way east to Arizona, Temecula Valley, Riverside, all the way to San Diego to our south, and our beautiful mountain communities, upper desert, all the way to state line to our north. Get us crystal clear live worldwide by going on to Google Play or Apple App Store and downloading the free KMET smartphone app today. We focus each week on successful businesses in Southern California and the people behind them, serving a local population of nearly 25 million. Today's show focuses on business and secrets of Southern California's healthcare industry, specifically occupational injuries and personal injuries. You won't believe what we're going to learn today about brain and spine injuries in particular and much more. Special thanks last week's guest, Mr. Stephen Larson, founder of Larson LLP, a former federal judge. Now he's in the top 100 attorneys in the state of California, specializing in complex white-collar defense and complex business and commercial law. So, and by the way, Yvette Walker will be talking about how to download that and many more here shortly. But as customary, Yvette Walker will introduce this week's special guest. Yvette, the microphone's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daryl. And thank you to everyone that's here with us today. I have today the extreme privilege to introduce to you Blake Wade Berman. Dr. Blake Berman is a board-certified and fellowship-trained spinal and neurological surgeon. Dr. Berman served as the Section Chief of Neurosurgery, Director of the Icon Division of Spinal Surgery, and Co-Director of the Neurosurgery Residency Program at Desert Regional Medical Center in Palm Springs, California. Dr. Berman is a graduate of Western University of Health Sciences in Pomona, California. He completed his neurosurgical residency and combined subspecialty fellowship training in complex spine and neuro-trauma at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center in Colton, California. Dr. Berman is a highly productive, efficient, and talented neurosurgeon with proven expertise in both private practice and academic neurosurgery, with recognized excellence in achieving the highest cultural, ethical, and professional standards. Dr. Berman has also published numerous peer-reviewed articles in national journals, several book chapters, and abstract presentations at national conferences, and is an assistant clinical professor of neurosurgery at Western University of Health Sciences and California University of Science and Medicine. Dr. Berman has surgical expertise and special interests in all aspects of spinal and cranial surgery, including minimally invasive spinal techniques, complex reconstructive techniques for adult spinal deformity and degenerative disease, image-guided techniques for both spinal and cranial tumor surgery, skull base and keyhole approaches for cranial tumors and aneurysms, and transnasal approaches for cranial tumors. In addition to his commitment to academic excellence, Dr. Berman prides himself on his devotedness to his patients and on his dedication to providing quality and compassionate neurosurgical care to the community. His philosophy and practice are based on service and integrity while maintaining the highest of ethical standards. When not caring for patients, Dr. Berman is an avid and practicing singer, songwriter, and bass guitarist. His appreciation for both medical sciences and the musical arts, in addition to his tireless pursuit of excellence, keeps him grounded, humble, and contemporary. Thank you so very much for joining us today, Dr. Berman.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on the show. Thank
Well,
you.
everybody's in for a treat. Our format for the station is obviously news and talk, and we sprinkle in a little sports as the exclusive broadcaster for the Lakers, the Clippers, the Rams, and the Angels. Uh, what's fun about our KMET uh, uh, call sign is Dr. Berman is going to be able to take us through his past, and he remembers KMET before we set it for talk and news and sprinkling in the sports. So we're going to have some fun. So with that, Dr. Berman, let's go back. You personally, let's so our listeners can really know you as a person. Let's go back as far as you want to go. What is it that inspired you to go deep, deep, deep into medicine, and what also inspired you to go deep into music? You have such a unique background that I think everybody's going to get a real kick out of it. So you, better than anybody, can tell the story about your background. So go with it.
Yes, thank you very much, Daryl. It's obviously not a short story. It's a life story. And I remember the first time I told it to you. I think your coke was coming out of your nose. Listening to some of the trials and tribulations. It's a journey. It was a long haul. I definitely did not take the traditional route to going to medical school. I would say the traditional route would be you go to high school, you graduate from high school, you do well, you're competing with the top 1 or 2% of people in the country trying to get into a medical school, and then you hopefully get in and you go to medical school for 4 years and come out and do a residency, maybe a fellowship in some area of practice. But that is definitely not the way I did it. Not because I didn't want to do it that way, but because sometimes life pulls you in different directions, and I think part of the spice of life is experiencing different things and trying new things out and learning from those experiences. So it really was a learning experience. I was very academic. I did very well in high school, but I was always drawn to musical arts and the idea of playing in a rock band and being a rock star, so to say, was very attractive to me, and it was something I definitely gave everything I had. So after high school, much to my mother's dismay, I remember telling her that I was not going to go to college, that I was going to give the college try, so to speak, to trying to make it in music. And so my brother is my drummer, and the two of us set out on a path to try to be successful in music. And that was at a very interesting time in, let's call it, the rock and roll scene, when the 80s rock bands, or let's call them hair bands, were sort of being phased out by a new up-and-coming genre of music called the grunge scene. And that bands
Yes.
Nirvana.
Nirvana, yes.
Yeah, so Nirvana was taking the radio waves by storm, and literally changing the face of what kids were listening to. And so suddenly many of we heavy metal hair bands found ourselves without a job.
That would be a very, very quick pivot, right?
Yes, it was. I had always been interested in medicine. I'd always been drawn toward healing. I've always been a compassionate person, somebody who was always drawn to help people, so to speak. And so in order to pay for the cost of being a musician, which, by the way, was rather expensive. Back in those days, you couldn't get a gig without paying for it. They called it the pay-to-play era. And so you went to a promoter and tried to get onto a venue, and you would have to buy tickets for those venues, and they would charge you anywhere from $5 to $10 per ticket. Well, imagine if you're trying to get 100 people there, that's $500 to $1,000 that you got to come up with. In the 80s, when you're not working and you're in a heavy metal band, that's a lot of money. So we would have to actually go out and try to sell those tickets. So we would hustle to all of our friends and family, and wouldn't you know it, the primary people that showed up every time were my mom, my wife.
Oh, moms are the best. Moms are the best, I have to say.
They are. So they were front and center, and so we would have a guaranteed sales of, let's say, 10 to 15 people every time, because they were my immediate family.
Right.
And then we would have to try to sell those tickets. So when the music scene changed, that became particularly difficult. Heavy metal bands weren't really the thing anymore. And at the time, in order to subsidize that, I went to school to become an X-ray tech. And so I was doing that as a job. And at the same time that this was introducing me more to doctors and the medical field in general, I was kind of being tugged in both directions. So when the era, so to speak, changed, I needed to find something else to do. And so in 1992, I made the decision that I was going to quit music, at least for a period of time, and I was going to go back to school. I desired to go to medical school, but I got to be honest with you, it scared the living daylights out of me. It's not something you take lightly.
Right.
It's something you have to understand that it's going to consume you in every way, shape, and form, and you've got to be prepared mentally, physically, and otherwise for it. So I definitely did not just get into a college and start trying to get my degree and trying to get into medical school. In fact, I didn't know what to do. I didn't really have any advice. I didn't know anybody that knew how to go about doing this. And let me tell you, good advice is worth its weight in gold. So, I struggled trying to figure out how to do this. I thought that, as long as I had a decent academic record, I could probably get into a medical school, but I was gravely mistaken. That is not what it takes. You have to understand that the medical schools have their pick of the litter, and there's some exceedingly smart people who have incredible academic records, and they're not looking for the guy who was a former musician, who was an X-ray technician. I thought being an X-ray technician and being involved in the medical field, that was going to give me a leg up, but in fact, it really didn't. So I struggled to kind of try to figure out how to do this. And so I started at Chaffey College. I went to junior college, and born and raised in Southern California, and I grew up in Rancho Cucamonga. I've been in Rancho Cucamonga since 1977. And before that, I was in Chino. So I'm a native Inland Empire guy. So started out at Chaffey and took classes here and there. And I figured as long as I take my prerequisites, I should be fine. Well, that wasn't the case. I kept trying to figure out how to go about doing this. And finally, after a year at Chaffey College, I had enough credits to transfer to a 4-year university. So I took a few classes at Cal Poly. I went to a college that was an accelerated science college, and all they taught were physics, chemistry, biology, and organic chemistry. And they rammed it down your throat in 8 weekends, 8 hours a day. Wow. On Saturday and Sunday. You would get full college semester credit for each of those classes in 8 weekends. Well, imagine a full semester of organic chemistry and physics rammed down your throat in 8 weekends. medical schools didn't want to see that kind of stuff. They really wanted to see that you went to a good 4-year university and had that degree and your academic record is good. So that stuff really didn't help me, and I had to figure out quickly what to do. So I discovered that there were 2 types of fully licensed medical practitioners: osteopathic physicians and allopathic physicians. And I knew nothing more than an encounter that I'd had with one osteopathic physician when I was an x-ray technician, and I really didn't even know that he was a real doctor. I'd only heard of an MD. I had no idea that there was something called a DO. And so I started researching it. And I discovered that indeed, not only were DOs fully licensed physicians and surgeons accepted in all 50 states, but that there were ways that I could probably help myself to get in specifically to the Western University program. And as it turned out, I actually had a family friend who was a urologist, who was an osteopathic physician. And so I spoke to him and I figured out how maybe I could try to get into Western University. So I discovered University of Laverne. And I believe you guys had the new president of University of Laverne on your show the other day.
Yes, Dr. Lieberman. We absolutely love her and her heart of service as she serves as president for the University of Laverne.
Yes, correct. She serves as president.
That's right.
That's really thoughtful, ambitious, humble, I would say. So when I learned that University of Laverne had what they referred to as a ladder program, they don't guarantee that you'll get in, but what they can promise you is that if you do well in their academic program, that you can at least be interviewed at Western University. So that's what I did. I got into University of Laverne, and from that point forward, I just never looked back. I sunk myself into it and graduated magna cum laude from University of Laverne. But at the time, I was still interested in allopathic medicine as well. So I tried applying, and at that time, there was no universal application process where you could log on to a website and put your information in, and it would, for a single fee, it would go to all the medical schools you selected. You had to, by mail, ask for an application from every program you were interested in, and they sent you a massive application by mail, and you either hand filled it out or you stuck it in a typewriter. Some of the listeners listening today may not remember that before computers, we had these devices called typewriters.
Yes.
Where you physically had to strike a key in order to get a letter to appear on it. If you messed it up,
I remember the correction tape and the whiteout and all that fun stuff, waiting for it to dry so you can strike over it again. Yes. The good old days.
You were lucky if you had correction tape on your typewriter.
Yes, that was fancy.
That was an advanced typewriter, exactly.
Yes.
So I had to hand fill out all of these applications, and I applied to 50 allopathic medical schools the first year around. I say first year around because I didn't get in the first year around. I applied to 50 programs. It was $100 per application. So
wow.
Do math. That was a $5,000 price tag I had to come up with. And in those days, it wasn't easy to come by $5,000. But, my wife, who has been my devoted partner my entire life, who has stuck by me and saw me through this whole process, worked. And she busted her butt to make a living and help for me to pay for this. She believed in me, and we applied to 50 programs, and I got 50 no's.
Oh no!
And so that was heartbreaking, of course. But, perseverance. If you don't keep trying, then of course you'll never get in. So
Right.
the second year around, I applied to the same 50 programs. I had a little bit more to say about myself, a few more advanced classes, because then by that time I had picked up a minor in physics at the University of Berman. And so that may have looked a little better. So the second year around, I decided that I would apply to the same 50 allopathic colleges, but this time I was going to apply to at least 5 osteopathic colleges. And one of them was Western University. And I always tell young aspiring medical students that your main goal is to get interviews, and you go where you get in, because it's tough enough. You got to go where you get in. If you've got your pick of the litter, well, then God bless you. I definitely didn't have my pick of the litter. So the second year around, after another 50 no's, I got the same 50 no's.
Wow.
And, the 5 osteopathic colleges started coming back one by one, and count them down: no, 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 and yes. I got one opportunity to have an interview from Western University. And the strangest things happened in the process of planning for that one chance at an interview. And it has to be by design. I got to be honest with you. Some of the most incredible things happened. For example, the week before my interview, I was supposed to get a haircut. Of course, you don't want to get your haircut days before, because you got to let it grow out a little bit. Right? This is my one shot. Keep in mind, your follicles got to be in place, or it's going to be a disaster. So I was supposed to get my hair cut from the girl that cuts my hair all the time. And she calls me an hour before my haircut and tells me that she's sick as a dog and can't do it. And so now I have to figure out, where am I going to get my hair cut now? So I called the girl who had done it previously, and she says, sure, I can fit you in at noon. So I went there, and I'm sitting there, and there's a guy in her chair already. And she calls me, she's waving me over. Wait, come here, come here. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you still got this gentleman in your chair, but okay. I go over there, and she says, Blake, this is Ken Dale. And of course, I'll never forget the name. And I'm extending my hand. Hi, Ken. he says, hi, Blake. He says, I understand you have an interview at Western University next week. He goes, I'm a medical student there, and I'm on the acceptance committee.
Oh, nice.
So he says, who's interviewing you, or what day are you interviewing? Mm. And I said, it's next Saturday. So he pulls out this calendar, and he goes, oh, there you are. There's your name. He says, you're interviewing with, I don't remember their names now. It's been such a long time. You're interviewing with Professor X, Y, and Z. Well, I took that information. I went back home, and I learned everything about who Professors X, Y, and Z were. And I read their papers. I learned everything about them. And the interview went really, really
very well.
At the end of the interview, they said, why do you want to come here? And of course, I'm not going to tell them, well, you're my only shot. So I said, this is the only school I'm interested in. I said, I'm so interested in Western University that I know everything about the three of you. I know where you went to school. You went here, you went there, you went here. And I said, I know what your PhD was in. I particularly loved your research on, and I don't remember any of it. 20 years ago, or 1997 was my interview. And so they looked at each other and they went, wow, what a phenomenal memory. And I'm like, yes. I remember it like it was yesterday. With the look in their eyes, like, wow. this guy really does know, who he's interested in. So they said you'll know by next Friday. We'll send you a certified letter. That certified letter showed up on my doorstep and said congratulations. And from that point, I never looked back.
Awesome.
Congratulations and bravo.
That's awesome. And by the way, when you took your neurosurgery exams, how did you score on the entire West Coast of the United States?
Well, there's two categories. Well, there's two things. I think what you're talking about is we have what's called an in-service exam. And the in-service exam is something that's given by all of the programs nationwide, and there's a certain number of programs. At that time, there were far more programs for osteopathic physicians than there are today. Unfortunately, there have been some recent changes, but so back then, in my final 2 years of residency, I was ranked either number one or number two. Number one in my year, number two overall.
See there, that's what happens when you start out in Rancho Cucamonga. You go right on through University of Laverne, through Western, and you end up scoring way high, number one on your
And Chaffee
neurosurgery
College.
board. Yes. And Chaffee.
And Chaffee.
We are here with Dr. Blake Berman, neurosurgeon with Healthpointe, and we will be back momentarily.
Ontario International Airport is onto a better way to fly with over 65 daily nonstop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today.
Being sued and don't know who to turn to? The insurance company won't defend you and your family in a lawsuit? Stress no more. Call the Walker Law Group. We are the law on your side. Just call 909-989-3200. 909-989-3200.
Take KMET 1490 AM with you everywhere you go by downloading our free smartphone apps found on the KMET website, KMET1490am.com. You can also go to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store on your phone to download the free app. Now you can listen live or play any of your favorite programmers' podcasts using your smartphone. Go to KMET1490am.com and download your free phone app today.
Join Daryl McCance and Yvette Walker each Tuesday at 4 p.m. on ABC News Radio, KMET, and Internet KMET TV for the Southern California Business Report. The show highlights successful businesses and individuals behind them. Daryl and Yvette interview the incredible people managing these enterprises that range from awe-inspiring sole proprietors to world-renowned organizations. The Southern California Business Report, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. on KMET AM, FM, and Internet KMET TV.
The University of Laverne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in Laverne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of Laverne. go.laverne.edu.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining the Southern California Business Report. We are here with Dr. Blake Berman, neurosurgeon with Healthpointe, and with Yvette Walker and myself, Daryl McCance. Before we went to break, we were talking about the transition into neurosurgery, and we're going to jump into the how you became acquainted with Dr. Silva and Healthpointe. And once again, no one knows that story better than you. So let's start and launch off from there.
Yeah, thank you. So how I got involved with Healthpointe and how I actually met Dr. Silva. And just to emphasize, Dr. Silva is the brainchild behind Healthpointe. He is the founder, he's our president, he's one of my mentors, and he is one of my all-time best friends. He is the perfect boss. And I wouldn't even call it boss, I would say he's the perfect leader. The opportunity came about when I was actually working as a general practice doctor. I hadn't quite gotten into neurosurgery residency yet. This was back in 2004 and 2005. And what happened was I completed medical school in 2002. I did an internship in 2003. I went to Michigan and did a year of general surgery residency in 2004. And then at the end of 2004, I came back home to Rancho Cucamonga and opened an occupational medicine clinic. Now, the reason I did that was because I sort of grew up in the profession of industrial medicine. And how that occurred was through my x-ray experience. Those were the types of offices I just seemed to always find myself in. And so I understood the business and the practice of occupational medicine from the, I won't say lowest because none of it is low, but let's say from the most basic areas of the practice, otherwise known as the medical assistants, the x-ray technologists, the people that are, caring for the patients, to the actual physicians. And so I opened my own occupational office. Well, unfortunately, I opened it at probably the worst possible time. Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor at the time. And in 2005, a new Senate bill had just passed. It's called Senate Bill 899. That Senate bill essentially turned workers' comp or occupational medicine, industrial medicine into managed care. At that time, managed care was really just becoming the almighty method for servicing patients on a more industrial scale, a mass scale. And if you didn't belong to a specific, let's call it an HMO or PPO, one of those types of insurance companies, then you couldn't see those patients. Well, industrial medicine was not that way at the time. And because it wasn't that way, there were a lot of people taking advantage of the system, both on the medicine side and on the legal side. There were a lot of attorneys and there were a lot of doctors that were committing fraud. I'm just going to come out and say it. There was a lot of fraud. And so there were a lot of patients getting surgery for the sake of surgery and not because it was indicated. They would be running up bills in the millions by keeping them in a perpetual cycle of physical therapy and unnecessary, overutilized medical services. And so this was bankrupting California. It was a serious problem. And Schwarzenegger had signed into law Senate Bill 899, which basically, for all intents and purposes, turned industrial medicine into a more managed care type of environment. Now, it has pros and cons, as most things do. It certainly got rid of a lot of the fraud, but in many ways, it also makes the system much more difficult to care for the legitimately injured patients. And the reason that is because there is a set of laws and guidelines now that we must practice by. And if we can't check the boxes off that we have met all those guidelines, there are peer-reviewed doctors in the background who have never seen our patients. They only know them by name and number. They have no idea what their physical exam is other than what we've written down. And they are the ones who are essentially approving or denying what we can and cannot do. So, for example, if I feel that surgery is indicated, I can't just say, I think surgery is indicated, I'm requesting authorization for surgery. I have to be extremely detailed. I have to meet every specific guideline. I've gotten a little off course, but because those changes were so dramatic, I sort of found myself and my company not doing so well. And so this gentleman by the name of Dr. Ishmael Silva, Izzy, we call him, was the knight in shining armor that came to my office one day interested in buying the company. And so that was the first time that we met. Now, ultimately, I was working with some not so great people at the time. That's a whole nother story. Maybe we can do an entire hour on that. And I remember the first time I told you that story, Daryl. But in any event, so Dr. Silva had ended up not purchasing that company, but that was the start of a beautiful relationship. And so I started working as an occupational medicine doctor for Dr. Silva and Healthpointe. And at the time, it wasn't even called Healthpointe. It was almost on the verge of becoming Healthpointe. It was Southern California Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and First Care Industrial Medicine. And they were, operating out of the same offices, but they were separate entities. And so I was working for him in occupational medicine, but there was something about my life that was just not complete. I was very interested in surgery, very interested. And so Dr. Silva set it up to where I could assist some of the surgeons, some of the orthopedic surgeons in the operating room. The unfortunate thing was, because I was a physician, I had to be board certified in something, and I had to have residency training in something. I had only done the 1 year of general surgery, but because I didn't have a board certification in anything, it could have been medical basket weaving if it existed, I could not get hospital privileges. And so I couldn't even be an assistant for these doctors. Well, that was putting me in a position psychologically that I couldn't take. I was very unhappy, and I needed more. And at the time, we were making a living. We had purchased our first home, and we had bills to pay. And I couldn't just tell my wife, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to quit all that and go back to residency for $0." But there again, there is her perseverance and her swallowing her own pride for my benefit and being by my side, and she sucked up the excess weight, worked harder, and allowed me to go back to residency. And by the grace of God, I was able to land a neurosurgery residency at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center. And I have to thank my good friend and mentor, Dr. Javed Siddiqui, for that, and Dr. Dan Muley, two great friends who were instrumental in getting me where I am today. I completed that residency in 2012 and fellowship also in 2012, and immediately went to work for Healthpointe as a neurosurgeon, spine surgeon. But even then, there was something missing. I needed more. So after about 22 months, I told Dr. Silva that I felt like I needed something bigger. And of course, he stuck by my side. I continued to do some work part-time for Healthpointe, doing mostly what are called qualified medical evaluations. And he would let me do that on occasional weekends while I was in residency. And I'm sorry, we're talking now after residency. He would let me do that on the weekends. And I went back to a position at Desert Regional Medical Center. And that is when Dr. Siddiqui made me the co-director of the residency program and the Section Chief of Neurosurgery. And that's where I really got my wings under me, was at Desert Regional. Training residents, bringing up the next generation, being on the cutting edge of neurosurgery. That's what I needed. And, like many things, things evolve, people evolve. And, when something when one well dries up, you need to find water in another one. It's not that it dried up, but it was just that I felt like I had optimized that position. It was time for me to make another change. And so I called Dr. Silva in early 2019. No, I'm sorry, early 2020. And I asked him if I could come back. And of course, with wide open arms, he brought me back, and I've now been back at Healthpointe full-time for about a year and a half.
Well, we are here with Dr. Blake Berman, neurosurgeon, Healthpointe, and we're going to dig deep into what they're doing at Healthpointe. And the story so far has been a story of perseverance. Every time someone sees someone successful, like you, Dr. Berman, everybody thinks, wow, he's so lucky. He just woke up one morning, he's a neurosurgeon. And that's why I just, Yvette and I have been looking forward to having you on air, because one successful person after another, we're seeing the same backstory, just a tremendous amount of obstacles to overcome. And every time you get knocked down, you got to pick yourself up, brush yourself the dust off, and stay focused. And what you and Dr. Silva are building and working on every day at Healthpointe it's really, really amazing. And the fact is, and again, Yvette Walker and I talk about here in Southern California with 25 million people, we have people that are waking up in one county and going visiting a family member in another, going to their office in another. No greater example than you, where, you wake up in your house in San Diego and you're running over to see family in Rancho Cucamonga. You have your office in Riverside counties that you're all over the Inland Empire. So, you are just the absolute case study of what we're talking about all the time, that all these areas have come together, and we just have little neighborhoods. We got the Orange County neighborhood and the LA County neighborhood and Riverside and San Bernardino. And ironically, that's the focus of Healthpointe. You guys are in Los Angeles County, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino. So let's take us deep into Healthpointe. Let's talk about some secrets, what's happening in terms of your area of specialty, which is the brain and spine, and anything else you want to talk about.
Sure. So that is one of the beauties of Healthpointe, is that we're everywhere. If you live somewhere in Southern California, Healthpointe is there. And Healthpointe is now a 4+ decades old healthcare organization that basically offers just about every type of subspecialty that you can imagine. Everything from behavioral health to full-blown brain surgery. I would say that we're a one-stop shop. We don't just treat industrial injuries. We treat private insurances as well. So we take almost all comers. We don't necessarily accept all insurance plans, but certainly if a listener is out there and wants to know, do we accept your specific private health insurance, just give Healthpointe a call and ask them, an actual human being will get on the phone and they will answer all of your questions. Certainly, if we accept your insurance, then we can treat your illness or ailment most likely. But that being said, Healthpointe does have a meat and potatoes sort of arena that it specializes in, and so we are a very large occupational injury and personal injury medical group. And so what that means, personal injury is somebody who gets injured, either by someone else's negligence or maybe it's a pothole in the street that someone steps in, breaks their ankle. We treat those patients. So we will treat patients on a lien basis if they've retained an attorney. We work with attorneys throughout Southern California. Some of the top attorney groups anywhere in Southern California, for sure. But we also work with just about every Southern California company, large and small. We've got some of the biggest names in the entire Southern California in terms of businesses that rely on Healthpointe to provide care to their injured workers. And so it can be anything from a skin rash from being exposed to a chemical to an actual traumatic brain injury. For example, I've had patients in all facets, but my specific area of expertise is brain, spine, and neurological disorders. And I would say the bulk of what I do is spine. Take, for example, tumor and malignancy. While I do see those types of patients, that isn't the bulk of what I'm doing at Healthpointe. We certainly are trying to expand those arenas and those areas, and we absolutely will be doing that. But for the most part, I would say the bulk of the types of things I do are really two, and that is spine-related injuries and what we refer to as mild traumatic brain injury. Mm. Now, mild traumatic brain injury is one of the areas of medicine that we feel at Healthpointe has been grossly overlooked. And actually, there is a huge up-and-coming interest in mild traumatic brain injury. Mm. And what we've discovered is that when someone has a severe traumatic brain injury, it's obvious, it's overt, it's clear. The person is not the same person anymore, whether that's physically, emotionally, etc. But patients with mild traumatic brain injury are still the same people. They just are experiencing difficulties in their life that didn't exist before their head injury. And those things can be anything from new onset of headaches that they didn't have prior to real physical ailments. For example, ringing in the ears, or what we call tinnitus, blurry vision, problems concentrating, memory difficulties. Their family members are telling us, look, my husband is not the same guy he was after this injury. Yes, certainly he can sit at the dinner table and have a conversation, and he's still Bob, but Bob is not the same guy today that he was before this car accident, for example. In the past, we didn't have a really good way of diagnosing mild traumatic brain injury and, moreover, treating it. How do you treat it? You certainly don't cut out a mild brain injury. It's not something you operate on. It's something much deeper that needs to be nurtured. And so Healthpointe is on the cutting edge of the industry, I'll call it, of mild traumatic brain injury, this new area of personal injury and occupational injury. So take, for example, a patient of mine who works in a tire company, and he was replacing the tires on the wheels of a car. And in order to do that, I'm sure most of the listeners have seen this device before. The wheel goes on this device, and they pop the tire on sort of superficially, put a little lubricant around it, pop this rod into between the tire and the wheel, and press the on button on the machine, and the wheel goes, the rod goes around the wheel and pushes the tire onto the wheel. Well, somehow the machine malfunctioned, and the hydraulic pressure of the device caused the rod to pop off and hit the patient in the head. And it did fracture the skull. It fractured the skull, and the patient was seen initially in the emergency room. And in the emergency room, the CAT scan, although it showed a fracture, it did not show any injury to the brain, or so it seemed. And as we've discovered, with mild traumatic brain injury, you're not necessarily going to see overt trauma on a CAT scan. Even if you do a standard run-of-the-mill MRI, you're not necessarily going to see a mild traumatic brain injury. There are I'm sorry, go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, but you were able to spot it with the new technology.
Yes, which is wonderful. And we're very excited that you have those capabilities, which sets you apart and makes you, the place people want to go when they need this treatment. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Berman. For everyone that's listening to us today, thank you so much for joining us. Look for us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Check us out on scbrtalk.com, and don't forget to download the free live streaming app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. Check out our YouTube channel and download our interview with Stephen G. Larson. Larson is a former U.S. District Judge and founding partner of Larson LLP. Stephen Larson has spent his career at the center of the most high-profile, complex civil and white-collar criminal matters in the country. With a national reputation in the courtroom, he is recognized annually by the Daily Journal, California's leading legal newspaper, as one of the top 100 lawyers in California. In his decades of practice as a trial and appellate lawyer, Stephen has been lead counsel in scores of federal and state court jury trials and appeals, including before the California Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court. Next week, we will have a board-certified clinical pathologist, Dr. Axelrod, who is also president and CEO of Lifestream Blood. He received his medical degree and performed his anatomic and clinical pathology training at Emory University School of Medicine and Emory University affiliated hospitals in Atlanta, Georgia. He also completed a fellowship in transfusion medicine at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, California, and acquired his MBA at the J.L. Kellogg Graduate School of Management, Northwestern University, Evanston, Illinois. Everyone, don't miss it. See you next week.